Wow.
That was hot.
Professional.
Hey.
That was hot.
Are you warm over there now, or is it just the light?
It's just the light.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
First off, I have to apologize to everyone. I have my handy dandy Kleenex here because my sinuses have said the ultimate bugger off.
Yours. The ultimate up yours tonight.
Yes. So if you don't hear me, it's because I don't want to blow my schnoz in your ears tonight.
I'll tell you, if it's not me coughing, it's you sneezing and blowing mucus all over the place. However, we'll say blowing mucus all over the place is much better than blowing other stuff all over the place.
Yo.
Ba-dum-bum. Thank you very much. I'm here all night. Try to fish.
All right. So you said you. Okay. Anyway, so you said you had a rant.
I do have a bit of a rant. However, I do want to take a minute and just, say how nice it is to have producer Cherry in the house this evening. You know, she's sitting over here to my left, so it's really nice to have her in here. And boy, as she could probably go on more of a rant than I could tonight. Let me tell you, we almost thought we were going to have her join us from the airport.
Yeah.
That good, huh?
Yeah, that good.
Yeah. So.
Or bad, however.
Hey, folks, if you would, real quick, before I kind of get into it, first of all, like Cherry said, welcome to the show. And also, let us know if our audio is coming through okay tonight. I'm actually back in the outdoor studio tonight. Yeah, I am. I'm back in the outdoor studio. I've got a solid internet connection going on right now. And just want to make sure that the sound is coming through okay. Solid as a rock, baby. That was actually on 80s on 8 last night.
I know. I listened to it today.
Oh,
Twice.
did you? Nice.
Yeah, it was the countdown.
Nice. Okay, so here's kind of my rant, if you will.
Let me get comfortable.
So there was a meme that was posted this week, and I was going to upload it, but I decided not to upload it. So I'm just going to kind of give you the gist of it. It was talking about spanking kids. And so when I was younger, I had my ass busted on a regular basis, not just by my dad.
You deserved it.
Yes, not just by my dad, but and my mom, but also like school teachers, took turns whacking me on the rear end. So I mean, it was a pretty common occurrence. Now, I learned from that because that's how I learned. Hey, I don't want to get like physically punished, so I'm not going to do stuff. I'm going to think of other things. Kind of goes back to where we were talking a little while back, that if you don't want to get punched in the face, you don't say something to someone you shouldn't say. Kind of like if you don't want your ass busted, you don't do something that's worthy of getting your ass busted, right? So anyway, this meme was talking about rationalizing with children. Okay, now I think there's a line that there's a definite line between abusing your children and a definite line between disciplining your children. Okay, now not all children learn from physical punishment. Not all children learn from timeouts and don't do that until finally you get your ass busted. It's like, don't do that, and then you don't do it anymore because you get your ass busted, right? And yes, I'm using the word ass a lot because the whole like
you're offending Cherry.
Yeah, highly doubtful. The whole point of the meme was like, can your kids rationalize? No, don't spank them, or then why spank them? And then the other one was like, if they can rationalize, you know what? Let me just see if I can bring it up real quick and read it. It would probably be easier for me to do that
because I am lost.
Yeah, it was really frustrating to read because I would never be one to tell someone how to parent their kids ever. But at the end of the day, the meme said people who spank their kids are assholes. And I was just sitting there thinking, I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And here's what it says. It says, should I spank my child? A comprehensive flow chart. Are they old enough to understand reason? It's a flow chart. Yes, then use reason. No, then they're not old enough to understand the reason you're striking them. And then it says, stop hitting your child, asshole. And, I'm like, not many kids can actually reason at 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And here's kind of what I hold it akin to. It's like, if I see my kid stick his hand toward the fire, I'm going to pull his hand away from the fire.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get mad, but I'm going to pull his hand away from the fire. If I see my kids stick their hand toward the fire again, I'm going to firmly pull their hand away from the fire because they're going to get hurt. And then if my kid does it again, I'm going to smack the hell out of their hand and I'm going to tell them, no, you're going to get hurt or whatever, because some of them, they don't understand that. But I promise you, next time they think about sticking their hand near the fire, they're going to think about that swat that they got on their hand, you know? And I just think that it's much easier to incorporate corporal punishment into your child's rearing and help them understand that sometimes the consequence you're facing right now is less than the consequence you may face in the future. And I would much rather cause a little bit of a sting now than a severe burn later on. And I think that kind of goes with life as well. I would rather cause you a little bit of pain and discomfort right now so you think better next time, you actually use some thought process, because I was one of those kids. I didn't learn unless I got my ass busted, you know, and some would say I turned out okay, and some might argue that point, which is fine, you know. But and now if your kid does understand the reason and you don't have to do it and you put them in timeout, by all means, do that. But don't hate on other people or call other people an asshole because of the way that they discipline their children because you disagree with it.
Mhm.
And it goes the same way. It goes the same for the other way. Just because someone doesn't spank their kids doesn't mean they're a neglectful parent, doesn't mean they're a bad parent or whatever. It just means that they're choosing to raise their child differently. And I think you should really respect that. Abuse is not okay. Let's be clear about that. But anyway.
My 2 cents on that is what you said. When you read that, it kind of said that you just spank your child and go on about your business. What I've always done is when I discipline my kids, I will sit them down and tell them what they did wrong and the reason why I had to do that. So whether they can reason or not, it's the time that you take to explain why. You just don't do it and walk off and the kid's going. Because I think kids and toddlers have about the attention span of a dog. You know, a dog poops on the floor, you smack their butt, rub their nose in it, but you have to do it right away. You can't do it later.
Right. Yeah, agree 100%. You know, hey, Mick, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on tonight. All right, so Cherry, any thoughts on that before we kind of...
Well, I agree with you guys. I mean, I don't know that I would have let my kid personally make it to the third attempt before swatting him. So I mean, you know, I might be a little more quick, but yeah, there's no reason for the name calling. Give me a break.
Yeah, and maybe it's a Gen Z thing. I don't know. I don't know. Thomas is joining the show. Thomas, appreciate you being on here. Let's see what he's got to say. So, hi, Chuck. I agree with you. There are times you need to discipline your children. I think that is wrong with kids today. Parents do not respond responsibly to discipline them. I agree. It needs to be done responsibly. You can't just, you know, you just can't strike your kids.
Key word here is also consistency.
Right.
That's huge. In whatever discipline you do, you have to be consistent.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Consequences, rewards, everything. You know, so that's just part of parenting, which I was not always great at. Consistency I struggled with from time to time, but you know, I think every parent does. We're all trying to figure this out because, believe it or not, there is no handbook they give you in the birth room.
Really? Well, I wrote one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, a lot of people just like, shoot.
Nice. All right, so that's my rant, folks. Welcome to the show tonight. We've got special, not just special guests, but we have special author Nick Drago on tonight. He's actually going to share with us some writings from his memoirs that he has coming up. So we're looking forward to that. And then he's going to give us some things to chew on as far as, you know, the moon landing. Was it real? Was it not? Is it real? Is it Memorex? We don't know. But I think Nick's going to bring us some compelling information to at least, you know, get our wheels turning. So looking forward to that. And I think with that being said, we are going to bring on Mr. Nick Drago.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. We really need an applause machine. You know.
There we go.
I'm Chuck, Scott, Cherry.
Good evening,
nice
sir.
to meet you. Somehow I can't see you, but it's nice to meet you. I think we're Facebook friends now.
That's true.
Awesome. Yep. I've got her hidden over here in the corner. You know, she's Cherry. If it was Baby, I wouldn't put Baby in the corner.
Radio.
You know, but
A face for radio.
Uh-oh.
You got a face only a mother could love. No, I'm kidding.
Not my
Wow.
Wow. We won't go there. Sorry. That's another show.
Oh, that's a whole other show. Nick, did you by chance catch any of the opening thoughts?
Yeah. Spanking, if I may weigh in.
Please
First
do.
of all, I think people should mind their business about how someone else raises their child.
Amen, brother.
I don't have any children. I would probably try not to spank them, but I know how children are, and it's I think within reason it's okay. I don't have really too much to say. I think people should just let people do what they do. I mean, not let, you know what I'm saying, within reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Abuse is abuse, but yeah.
Yeah. And like up until a certain point, up to a certain age, I think it's okay. I think, and I'm not the one to say what age that should be, but I don't think teenagers should be struck, or anything like that.
Right.
It's a tough question. It's, but
yeah, I think that there's definitely at some point an age that you have to, when your kids can reason, then you can use other forms of discipline. I agree, but
yeah.
Anyway,
Take that phone away.
Oh, dude, that's murder.
Murder.
All right, awesome. Well, Nick, we appreciate you being on the show
Thank you.
as usual. And tonight you're kind of filling in a bit of a different role to start off with. And if you would, just before we start, tell us a little bit about your book, and then tell us a little bit about what you're going to be sharing with us tonight.
Okay. Well, let's see. Back in the 90s, the mid 90s, I kind of fell down. I started using drugs, like heavy, they were first I started smoking pot, and then I would do acid, then I do ecstasy, and then I try some cocaine, and all those things. None of those things really got their hooks into me, So, which I'm going to kind of talk about that. It's part of part of the chapter I'm going to read. But I very soon, very early on, while I was struggling with all that stuff, I started writing about it, because the things that I saw and the things that it led me to were just fascinating, really. And I couldn't believe that I found myself in positions that I found myself in. But it was too much to not write down, and I'm not really, I've written some poetry over the years and just for fun. And I never really kept a diary. Sometimes I would keep something, but not regularly write in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if something really exciting happened, I would write it down. I'd want to remember it. But I never got into really the habit of keeping a journal, or anything. But anyway, I've been writing about this for years. And I think the reason why I haven't ended it, and finished it, is because, well, I was still struggling with those things up until about 5 years ago, even though there were, a few years here and a few years there that I was, clean from everything. I would always replace one thing with another, like when I got off of heroin, I started drinking alcohol a lot, you know what I mean? And,
mm-hmm.
and so there was always something. Plus I was on a methadone program for a long time. When I got off of that, I would take pills. It was just always something. And then 5 years ago, I walked away. I stopped. And, and that's, I think now I want to kind of wrap it up and finish this, because I really do feel different about it than I've ever felt. There was always time, every time I stopped using, I would say, oh, this is it, this is it. But I mean, this time I just stopped and didn't look back, because I think I was just too old to do it anymore. And I really worried about dying. I really worried about overdosing, and I worried about doing something that would end me up in prison.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So first of all, what have you titled the book yet?
Yes. It's called Use Once and Destroy.
Okay.
And the reason why is because if you ever look at an insulin syringe, that's like a disposable syringe. That's what's typed on it. And it's actually in one of the chapters, but not the one I'm going to read tonight, where I used, a needle, and I saw that text on the typing on the
mm-hmm.
the syringe, and I thought it was very fitting. Use once and destroy, because I thought it had just ruined my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we only get one, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, it took a great chunk out of it, you know?
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking before you share with us, do tell us, when you had the idea to start your memoirs, what's what's your end goal with your memoir? Is it strictly therapeutic for yourself? Is it more for therapy for other people who are struggling and using as well? Like, what's your ultimate goal for writing the memoir?
At first, it was just kind of therapy. It was just like getting it out and stuff. And then I thought, you know, as years went on and stuff, I'm like, you know, I never really gave up on myself, you know, and I kind of got off of drugs through non-traditional. Well, I didn't go to AA, you know what I mean, and all that. And as a matter of fact, I'll still have a drink, you know what I mean, now. And it's just different than, I don't know. I just don't have that pull to, you know, to want to do it or anything. But anyway, I kind of just decided somebody else needs to hear this. Somebody else, you know, maybe if somebody reads it that's going through that kind of thing, they'll read it and they'll get some hope, you know what I mean, or something. So it's kind of both. It does serve as a warning too, you know. But yeah,
okay,
therapeutic and a warning, I guess, for anybody. And
yeah, I think it's really good that you mentioned at the beginning, talking about this, that, you know, you just did one thing and it wasn't a big deal, then you moved to another thing, and before you knew it, you kind of snowballed into a situation that you really didn't expect to find yourself in. So I think that that's how a lot of addicts, you know, end up, you know, in situations like that. So want to hear what you've written down. And folks, I do want to let you know that some of the content tonight that may be discussed in Nick's chapter is definitely not suitable for younger viewers. And there's some mature content and there's some adult language. So just want to kind of give you guys that. But what I really like about this, I'm looking forward to, is that it's real. So Nick, with that, I'd like to just kind of turn the mic over to you.
Okay. And also, folks, if you are going through this kind of thing, you know, this could, you know, some of the things I write about could be triggering to you. So think about that before you want to listen, you know. I have 2 chapters, but I could just read one. If anybody else wants to hear more, I could read the other one. But I'm going to start with this one because it's kind of like, it's not the beginning of the book. And it was just kind of like, it's the first time that I used the drug. So I thought about that would be a good place to just start and talk about. Okay. All right, here we go. Everybody at the restaurant had caught the same vibe from Dominic. He had a very eerie presence about him. Shady, they all would say. Blair hired him as a waiter because he was good looking and had an English accent. He wasn't rude or anything, but he always had this guilty look on his face. It dominated his entire demeanor. Late one night, Dominic and his tomboy girlfriend Paula went down to the Lower East Side of Manhattan to score a few bags of heroin. Once they reached Norfolk and Rivington, they were approached by a nervous-acting man who asked them if they were looking to buy some smack. "How many y'all need?" "3, Dominic said. The dealer searched the pockets of his jeans and shirt while gripping a glass pipe in one hand. "I know I got that shit. I got 1 bundle left." A bundle is 10 dime bags of heroin, a value of $100, usually packed together with a rubber band. The bundle that this crack-addled peddler of poison was searching for had fallen on the ground under the notice of dope-hungry Dominic, who quickly stepped on it to hide it from its frantic owner. "Damn, can you all wait right here a few minutes? I'll be right back with that shit." "We'll be right here, mate," said Dominic, literally not moving. The second this man was out of sight, Dominic picked up the dope, grabbed Paula's arm, and jumped in a cab. Back at their apartment, they sniffed a bag, but knew it was a bad idea to have that much stuff at their fingertips. They both had survived serious habits, and now were trying to be extra careful not to get hooked again. So they decided to keep 4 and sell the rest to their friends. 2 of those bags would be the first heroin I would ever ingest. Flamingo East was an Art Deco restaurant lounge on 2nd Avenue in the East Village. I worked there as a waiter and a bartender in the early 90s, a couple years after I moved to New York City. The restaurant attracted a hip downtown crowd and was constantly busy. It was a very demanding place to work. Having a cocktail at the end of the night to wind down became as regular as having a cup of coffee in the morning to wake up. I made friends with most of the staff at Flamingo East, and we partied together quite often. I was in my early 20s at this time and dealing with the recent breakup of a serious relationship. It turned out being single and working at a trendy night spot was good for my social life. I went to some cool parties and some fun clubs and met some really fun, interesting people. Drugs were everywhere. Despite all the new trippy drugs on the market, marijuana was still my drug of choice. I smoked it so often that it didn't even seem illegal anymore. Ecstasy was popular along with Special K and the ever-present cocaine, but I wasn't crazy about speedy highs. I used coke when I had too much to drink and needed to stay alert. Ecstasy was fun with a date. Acid, mescaline, and psychedelic mushrooms were fun to do once in a while with friends, and those Quaalude-like drugs could get you taken advantage of or robbed. None of these drugs brought me down or kept me from handling my responsibilities. I used them all in moderation, and when I saw that I was using too much, I stopped, very abruptly and without any trouble. So when Dominic came to work the next day and told me about his exciting score and asked me if I wanted to buy a bag of heroin, I thought it was something that I could handle. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make excuses like I didn't know better. I was well informed of the dangers of drug abuse, just like anybody that grew up during the Reagan administration. I heard all the tragic stories of heroin abuse, seen all the gritty urban dramas about some young, promising kid getting hooked and the inevitable downward spiral that follows. The truth is, I had used drugs recreationally for a few years and still managed to keep my job and pay my bills and support myself. I didn't think anything would change if I sampled a little dope. Still, I was reluctant to accept Dominic's offer. After telling him that I would think about it, he wrote down his number on a book of matches and put them in my pants pocket. At the end of the night, after I counted my tips and had a drink at the bar, Kelly, the hostess, came over to me and told me that my ex-girlfriend Nicole was on the phone. She had been my ex for a long time. It took us a couple years to really break up. We were caught in this cycle of not seeing each other for a couple months, then getting together and spending weekends together alone and avoiding everyone. After about 48 hours, we would remember why we broke up and spend the rest of the time fighting. This scenario always ended with me telling myself I would never speak to Nicole again. With this phone call, the destructive cycle that our relationship had become would take another destructive turn. I stepped out of the noisy lounge and onto the rainy sidewalk in search of a cab. It was after midnight on a Friday, but the neighborhood seemed quiet. As I sat in a taxi on my way to Nicole's apartment, I sank into a melancholy state. I knew that going to see Nicole was a bad idea. I knew that nothing could come of it, and the more we saw each other, the worse things would be in the end. I cabbed it over to her West Village apartment, and a typical night ensued. We had some wine and talked about what we had been up to since the last time we saw each other. After the sex, it was all downhill. Our conversation turned to who we were dating, then who was to blame for our breakup. We fell asleep angry. The next morning, while we were having coffee and pretending nothing was wrong, two of Nicole's friends stopped by. While the three girls chatted it up, I retreated into the bedroom to call Dominic. Sitting on the bed with the phone in my hand, I waited for my conscience to talk me out of what I was about to do. I reminded myself of the dangers of heroin and thought about all the brilliant people that succumbed to its unrelenting grip. I really tried to refrain from making that call, but down deep, I knew very well that I was way too curious to leave it alone. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the most pivotal moment in my life. I seriously waited to come to my senses. It never happened. After Dominic gave me his address, I was on my way. Walking up 8th Avenue and ignoring my conscience, I discovered that the day couldn't have been more beautiful. It was late May. The air was soft and the sun was mild. The sidewalks were crowded with people digging the spring weather. Dominic's apartment was on 23rd Street, directly across from the Chelsea Hotel. Every time I pass the Chelsea Hotel, I think of all the legendary writers, artists, and musicians who once stayed there. I imagine Sid Vicious being dragged out by cops after his girlfriend was found murdered. This time I stare at the old hotel and wonder if my life is about to spin out of control. What the hell am I doing? I finally ask myself. For a moment, I consider turning back, but then tell myself that I'm too strong and wise to let a drug bring me down. I didn't really believe that. It was just that if I would have turned back, nothing would have happened, and that wouldn't have been any fun. There would be no adventure in turning back. I approached the building and pressed the buzzer. A few seconds later, an unfamiliar voice said, "Hello," then buzzed me in. The voice belonged to Paula, who answered the door in nothing but 2 bath towels, one covering her head and the smaller one wrapped around her railish figure. Dominic was wearing a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt and looked like he just got out of bed. "Hey, what's up, man?" We talked a few minutes and the Englishman showed me his stolen goods. 5 small wax paper bags folded into inch-long rectangles containing the deadly narcotic. Upon recommendation, I purchased 2. After receiving dosage instructions from the expert, I left and went back to my apartment in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. When I walked in the door, I found that my roommate, Adur, had already left for a summer-long trip back to Iceland. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor of my living room and retrieved the dime bags from my pocket. I unfolded one and emptied the light brown powder onto a postcard of a nude Marilyn Monroe. With the edge of my driver's license, I made 2 straight lines and halted. Something about the powdered opiate draped over tragic Marilyn seemed ominous. I pushed it aside and smoked a joint instead. About 5 minutes later, I got over it and inhaled one of the lines. I paused a minute and waited. Nothing. I inhaled the rest of what was on the postcard, waited again, then felt a kind of heaviness. My nose began to tickle and my face got warm. I stood up to further assess the sensation. Just as I stood, I fell back into the couch and suddenly felt warm all over. I sat there for a bit, feeling the blood rush under my skin, not moving. When the next morning came, I was still in the same place on the sofa. Noticing it was still early, I got up to go to my bedroom to sleep for a few more hours. As soon as I stood, I began to get nauseous, and with just a few steps, I could tell I was going to be sick. In record time, I made it to the necessary room. After that, I retired to my regular sleeping quarters and slept most of the day. When I awoke later, I felt very depressed and guilty over sampling the heroin. My recklessness alarmed me, and I pondered why I liked to flirt with danger so much. These things were beginning to bother me a lot, and I found myself thinking about it more and more. On this night, however, I decided to snap out of it. I wanted to forget about things and go out and have some fun. After all, things were going good in my life. I took a shower and got dressed, then took the train into Manhattan. My first stop that night was a lounge on Avenue A. I knew the bartenders there and it was a regular spot for me. There I ran into a friend of a friend and got invited to a party in the neighborhood. I always love to go out without making any plans because you never know what will happen. As I walked through the crowded party, I noticed and smiled at the familiar faces and made my way to the makeshift bar. It was then that I ran into Zinnia, the Lush, as she was crudely referred. She was a tall German girl that loved to drink and party. I hung out with her for about an hour, talking about nothing special. Just as I was going to leave, I made eye contact with an interesting face in the crowd. I had seen her before but couldn't place it. When I knew the repeated eye contact was not accidental, I approached her and introduced myself. We talked for quite a while, and I invited her and her friend back to my place in Brooklyn to smoke some pot. I didn't think she would accept, and I immediately wanted to kick myself for seeming too eager. It turned out I was wrong. She excused herself for a moment, then returned with her friend and said, "Okay, let's go." We cabbed it back to my place, and the 3 of us hung out for a few hours smoking and listening to Jimi Hendrix. We seemed to have a lot in common. I knew that I could really like this person. Her name was Leslie. She was about a foot shorter than me and had pale skin and dark brown bobbed hair like Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. She also had a great personality and laughed a lot. When I could tell the girls were getting tired, I offered them my roommate's bed since he was out of town. They thought about it but had things to do in the morning, so they called for a car service and went home. Leslie gave me her phone number and we agreed to meet the next night. Over the next couple of weeks, Leslie and I were inseparable. Because we were so attracted to each other, our relationship was very physical. Still, we had a lot in common. We both loved music and always had something playing that we both liked. We loved going to the movies, and it was also So it was easy for us to decide on a movie to see. Our tastes were the same. I got along with her friends and she mine. After a few weeks, I started to notice tension. I was very disappointed in the way things were going. Our conversations were becoming like interviews. When we weren't talking, it would seem uncomfortable, and that was not how it was at first. Never had I seen a person change so suddenly. It was almost as if a button was pushed that changed her attitude toward me. I soon realized that she was trying to shut her feelings off to present herself from falling for me. This all was very frustrating, especially because I liked her so much, and I thought that if I could just get her to understand how I felt, then she would chill out a little. However, one night she came over to have dinner with me. As soon as she arrived, the night unfolded like this. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, smells good in here. You cooking? Yeah, I made pasta with sausage and peppers. Would you like some? That's very Midwestern. What is? Pasta with sausage and peppers. Leslie, when was the last time you visited the Midwest? Or have you ever been there at all? What? I don't have to visit the Midwest to know what Middle American Italians eat. Well, yes, you do, because in this case, you are absolutely wrong. Hell, you can go to any pizzeria in New York City and get sausage and peppers. I'm not going to argue with you about it. Why not? I thought that's why you brought it up, so we can argue about something. That's what you've been wanting to do so much of lately. Excuse me? I brought it up because you offered me some food and I made a comment about it that ruffled your little feathers, and now you're all mad about it and shit, and right. I offered you food that I took the time to make, and before you can even say thank you, you're criticizing it, as usual. I can't believe you're being so touchy. Are you sure this isn't about something else? No, you were rude, and if it seems like I have my guard up, it's because I do. I'm tired of being attacked every time we're together. It's like everything I say or do gets criticized by you. You take apart everything I say and try to prove it meant something else by it. And like what? Give me an example, she says. No, Leslie, I don't want to fight with you tonight. I'm not imagining this. You know how you've been acting toward me lately. Over the past couple of weeks, things have changed. You've actually become almost unbearable. Oh, so if I'm unbearable, then what are you still doing with me? I'm still with you because I'm waiting for you to snap out of this. I think you are probably afraid to care about somebody again, and that's why you've been acting this way, defensive all the time. I've seen the other side of you, and no, this is me. There is no other side, and if you don't like it, you can fuck off because I don't have any time for this shit. Okay. You know what, Leslie? I'm going to call the car service and have them take you wherever you want to go. I'll pay for it, and I don't care where you want to go. Just go somewhere else. I'm done. Fine, she said. Leslie had been there all of 5 minutes before I called for a taxi. Not another word was spoken between us while we were waiting for the cab to pick her up. She left, and I poured myself some more wine. About 20 minutes later, the phone rang. I thought it was going to be Leslie calling to apologize, but it wasn't. I recognized the voice immediately to be that of Nicole. I couldn't believe it. What timing. She told me that she missed me and wanted to see me. She sounded like she was in tears, but I could never tell any more with her. She faked her whole life. I told her that I was sorry I couldn't see her because I needed time to think. She proceeded to shout at me, calling me selfish, saying that she couldn't depend on me for anything and that I was going to be just like my father. That was her favorite thing to say to me when she couldn't get me to do what she wanted. It was like her left hook. So with that, I hung up the phone and called for another cab. This time I was leaving. I needed to blow off some steam. I washed my face and put on some clothes. Then the car arrived. I told the driver to take me to the East Village bar that I hung out at. I didn't just want to go out and see friends and have a good time. No, I wanted to get drunk and forget all about these two psychotic women in my life. As the taxi drove over the Manhattan Bridge, I gazed at the Manhattan skyline and thought about what a wonderfully exciting city it was. Do you like New York City? Asked the cab driver. Oh, yes, I replied. You can find anything you want in New York City. And then a menacing thought popped into my head. Before the car made it to the Manhattan side of the bridge, I redirected the driver to take me to 2nd Avenue and 14th Street, Flamingo East. I knew Kelly and Tommy were working and Kenny was tending bar. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. As soon as I walk through the door, Kelly greets me and says, "Where's Leslie?" My reply was a short, "I don't care, don't ask." Of course, I had to answer that same question a few more times before the end of the night, each time reminding me of the once harmonious relationship that should have been. It was a miserable night. No matter how much I drank, I couldn't stop thinking about Leslie and what went wrong. It frustrated me to no end that we really cared for each other, but obviously couldn't handle our own feelings. I had to put this out of my mind or it would get the best of me. Near the end of the night, just before last call, Dominic and his girlfriend Paula showed up. They joined me at the bar and asked me if I was drunk. Surprisingly not, I told them. I've been pacing myself. There weren't any bar stools that weren't taken, so the three of us sat down at one of the empty tables. That menacing thought popped into my head again, and I wasted no time. Dominic, you think you can score some more of that shit? What, dope? He said. They looked at each other and almost at the same time asked me if I had been regularly using the stuff. Hell no, I said. I only tried it that one time that you had it about a month ago. Dominic had this logic that if I did it one time a month ago and hadn't touched it since, then perhaps I was one of those people that could handle it. I doubt he really believed that, but at any rate, we made a deal that if I bought each of them a bag, a value of $20, then Dominic would go and make the buy. These had to be the terms because I didn't know where to find the stuff. While Paula and I waited a few blocks away, Paula let on that she was paranoid. She didn't like going to score this stuff. She said it was dangerous. It's not like buying a bag of pot in the park. These guys carry guns and have enemies with guns, and there's always some kind of beef over selling rights, she said. When Dominic met up with us, we decided to go to a nearby bar so we could use the bathroom to sample the goods. Once inside the stall, I opened the tiny wax paper envelope and dipped the tip of my apartment key into the deadly brown powder. I sniffed it up one nostril, then the other, and casually made my exit from the men's room. Dominic was already playing pool with some people he ran into. Paula was courtside nursing a soda. I sat down beside her and asked her if she was all right. She said she was fine, but that this stuff was stronger than the stuff I tried before. I told her that I could tell, but that I felt incredible. I remember having the sensation of not being able to stand up and keep my balance for more than a few seconds, and I couldn't understand how Dominic found it so easy to play pool. Waves of pleasure flowed through me until I was oblivious of my surroundings. Somehow I made it home that night. All I remember is putting some music on and falling asleep in a chair in my bedroom. A few hours later, I awoke and got sick in the bathroom again. It didn't really bother me, though. I immediately felt better, so I got into bed and had the most peaceful sleep of my entire life. On the answering machine the next morning, there were 3 calls from Nicole and 1 from Leslie. I was surprised at the latter. I didn't really care, though. I lost interest in calling either of them or even thinking about either of them. Truth is, I had such an intense euphoric feeling that I didn't care about anything. I took one of the bags of dope from my pocket and snorted the rest of it. I decided that I had never felt so good and that I was going to feel this way every day. I had to find more. I called Dominic and told him that I wanted to get some more. He refused and said, "That's how you get hooked, Nick. Leave it alone for a few days and then do it." I didn't listen. I would find it myself. I didn't care if I got hooked. I didn't care about anything else from that point on. I got dressed, walked out the door, and continued to not care.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Sure.
That's intense.
It is. And listening to it, I hear 2 different things going on. And you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but you know, at first it seemed like you were really looking for something that was more of an adventure than what you'd been doing, something that was offered a little more excitement to what you were doing. And then, you know, once you found it and you got, I hate using the word, I guess, but a taste you know, of what it was and the feeling that it brought you and the ability to kind of check out from life, you know, it seems like that was kind of your next step to, like, when things got tough between you and Leslie and Nicole, and just when your personal relationships got screwed up, so to speak, then that kind of filled that hole for you.
It certainly did. And one thing you get in that chapter is that, you know, I was a self-medicator.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I, you know, through the rest of the book would tell you, you know, other things that were going on in my life and that happened before that, it shaped the person I was to make those decisions. But that kind of gives you a sample of how there was like a straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And and that is every time I had relapsed and did, you know, after being clean for a while and did it again, it was always something like that, you know, that led me to doing, you know, to picking it back up. Just not being able to handle anything heavy and just, you know what I mean, and checking out.
Yeah.
You know?
And from what I understand, I'm kind of the same way. Like I've never had any addictions to medications. However, there was a time where I was taking oxycodone for some surgery that I had, that I was very thankful to have a doctor that said, you're not getting any more after this second script, because
I'm thankful for you for that.
know,
Yeah.
yeah. And, you know, so I'm very thankful for that. But it always seems to be the people who feel like they're the strongest, but they've got this, and maybe you could even describe it a little bit as a bit of a pride issue. Like, that's not going to happen to me. I'm good. I'm cool. I can handle this. It's
There was a bit of
now.
that. Yeah, there was a little bit of that. Sure.
Right. It you know, I don't want to sound too direct, but it seemed like there was, you know, when Chuck says that, you know, there was kind of like a it's not going to happen to me mentality. Would you equate that with a certain ego to it as well?
You know, really not to, you know, of course I have somewhat of an ego, you know, I think everyone should have a bit of one. But really it was more of a feeling of being invincible.
Okay.
Like it's not going to happen to me.
Right.
That kind of thing.
And who
But
doesn't
also,
feel that way in their 20s? You know,
yes,
who doesn't feel like,
yes.
I'm 20 something, nothing's going to happen to me, you know?
Yeah, I was 24 when that happened. Half my life ago, I guess.
Wow.
But yeah. But yeah, it was like and also though, Scott, to answer that, I also just didn't care.
Well, that's true.
You know what I mean?
That
I
is
just
true.
got to a point I just didn't care anymore, you know? So
You know,
yeah.
it's funny because a lot of people will have self-destructive thoughts, suicidal thoughts, whatever you want to call it, whatever. And it's not really that they're suicidal, it's just they don't care if they die, you know?
Exactly. Yes.
And while both are dangerous spots to be in, it's a very different feeling. And, you know, not wanting to exit the world, you know, is much different than not caring if something happens to you or not. And for me, I had been there a couple of different times throughout my life. You know, it's like I wasn't suicidal, but, you know, if my chips got cashed in, you know, on a certain day, I was perfectly okay with that.
Yeah.
And to take it back to the oxycodone thing, just to relate to it myself, that's kind of where I was at. You know, I mean, I was in a really bad marriage. I'd been in a hospital for a week, you know, about a week and a half after that. Things between this was my second wife, things between she and I at that point, you know, were not good. We had even fought while I was in the hospital. And then right after I got out, and I just didn't care,
Yeah.
you know, and I was kind of that way. And man, the drug was just it was a legal way for me to check out of life because, hey, I've got a prescription for this stuff.
Right. My
know?
name's on the bottle, man. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so it's interesting to hear your story where you self-medicated and still, you know, were in search of, you know, that high or that something different. And, you know, people look at that or may look at that differently than someone who's taking prescription drugs. And they're really kind of the same, you know, when you look at that mindset. So, man, thank you so much for sharing that,
Oh,
Nick.
you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. And, you know, I appreciate the book. Lisa says she can't, you know, she's interested in reading the rest of it. And I can't wait for it to come out for you to finish it up and be done. And, you know, so, I mean, that's awesome. And I love the way you write also, you know, so yeah, awesome. So Mac, you have anything you want to kind of follow up with Nick?
No, I was just, I thoroughly enjoyed, you know, I hate to say enjoyed it, but
it's interesting.
It did pique my interest, and it is, you know, I think everybody can relate to a certain aspect of what you read to us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Going through something with somebody or whatever it is, just too much stress in your life, just being overwhelmed and needing an avenue of escape.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cherry, do you have anything you wanted to maybe ask or say or comment on?
No, it's very interesting to hear Nick's side of it. You know, for me, I'm the opposite end of the spectrum where I didn't have to self-soothe or self-medicate because my grandmother was more than happy to. Your stomach hurts? I got pills for you. You don't feel so good? Have a few of my Xanax bars, So that was how my family, that's what I grew up around. Was I've spent my entire life, other than alcohol, but again, we won't discuss that today. But as far as any kind of, heavy drugs, I've shied away from that as much as possible, so it's interesting to hear your side. I do have close personal relations with people who have had a very similar story to yours, so it's interesting to have somebody put it into words so well, because I don't know that I would want to hear his stories quite so clearly.
Yeah, my girlfriend couldn't get, I gave her some to read, and she couldn't get through it. She couldn't handle it.
Yeah, I guess when your close relationship like that, it gets a little tougher, where it's like, I'm very intrigued, but I'm also like, you know what, we can just keep that part of your life just secret.
Yeah. But the nice thing about your story, Nick, also is that, similar to what Cherry was saying, I think your story is going to help people who are struggling with addiction or have struggled with addiction, maybe, kind of some closure or some understanding of themselves, but also may give others the opportunity to understand, where loved ones are at in their addiction, to be able to meet them somewhere, to be able to meet them at least with an understanding of, I never really thought of it this way before.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't deal with it myself, I can now empathize with you a little bit and understand, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And
I never thought that kind of thing would happen to me. You know what I mean? It just kind of, I in the chapter I kind of brought up, like, well, I used to do this drug, and then I started to, using, it was no problem and everything. So yeah, it just kind of gradually got there. You know what I mean? And and you could, sometimes people just kind of wake up one day and, how did I get here? Who am I with? What am I doing? There's a bit of that in there. So
yeah. So before we move on to the next section, Cherry, I'm actually going to ask, if you don't mind, would you look up the National Addiction Hotline, just so we can post that in case people are struggling with addictions,
right on, Chuck.
Things like that, because we do want to have that to be a resource out there. Cherry's going to look that up for us. We're going to get it posted here, but Nick, we got to get into the other stuff too, man.
Okay. This is a heavy one. Now, there's a lot with this moon thing. And speaking of chapters, this is the chapter. Once I learned this theory, this is when I fell down the rabbit hole of conspiracy. Now, I always, I knew about JFK and 9/11 and UFOs and things, and that always piqued my interest. But it was when I learned about the theory that Stanley Kubrick actually faked the Apollo moon footage for NASA and the government. Now, here's the thing. My standpoint right now is not so much, I don't think we made it to the moon. So some people, I know that gets some people upset. What I really think is we could have made it to the moon, but that movie that you've seen of it, that is not the moon. That is not that was filmed in a studio or in a desert or somewhere right here on Earth. I don't believe that is people on the moon. I don't. Now, sometimes I just like to point out things like with 9/11, like, well, steel doesn't melt this hot and all these facts, Well, with this one, I'm totally going to just I'm just going to theorize on this. Okay. And some of it's what I've put together. Some of it's what I've read other people theorize on. But okay, first of all, to overview it, the theory is that Stanley Kubrick faked the Apollo footage, but he wanted to tell you about it, so he put clues in his movies that he did this. Primarily, The Shining. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds weird, a horror film, and he put what Okay, so bear with me. Here we go. So it starts like this. You remember, or of when John F. Kennedy challenged the space program to get to the moon before the end of the 60s? Mm-hmm. He goes, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard, And well, here's the deal. The reason why he did that, in my theory, is that In 1947, there was the Roswell crash of a UFO, and there were aliens, and our government came into contact with these beings and with some of their technology. Okay. Kennedy learned about this when he was briefed, and he learned about these energies and these propulsion systems and things that they were using. And he said, well, this kind of technology, this could change the world. Imagine what, I want to unleash that. I want to give this to the people and all this. Well, the government, they were like, no way, you're not doing that. That's too disruptive. Well, so Kennedy decided to force them to do that, to force them to show us this technology. So he challenged them to get to the moon, because he knew we could not get there with rocket technology, but he knew we could get there with this new technology that we found. Okay. Excuse me. So Kennedy was killed, as we know, and then the space program, they were also in this thing with they still felt challenged by Kennedy. Plus they were in the space race with Russia. Yeah.
Right.
Russia.
Right.
So, what they did was, well, we can't make it to the moon, by the end of the decade. We'll get someone to fake the footage, and we'll just lie and say we did. So they found, master filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, because of his attention to detail. Okay, when he was working on Dr. Strangelove, he had he kind of made okay, hold on.
Great movie, by the way.
Oh yeah, right. He recreated the inside of the B-52 bombers. Okay, and he had seen the inside of these bombers from just like Popular Mechanics magazines and things like that, aviator magazines. And well, anyway, they were so realistic looking that he was once paid a visit by United States government. You know what I mean? And they tapped him on the shoulder and said, well, we have this project for you. Since you're so good at, paying attention to detail and, this and that, you're the best filmmaker in the world. Would you do this for us? Okay. Well, Stanley probably might not wanted to do that, but he felt it was an offer he could not refuse, because, well, if they asked him to do this and he said no, he knows they wanted him to do that. He knows they're planning on doing that, on lying about it. And you know what I mean? And
so why not be a part of that?
Yeah, but also he probably was smart enough to know that he could be silenced or something if he knew the secret, and they might want to get him out of the way.
Yeah.
So he put clues in his movie The Shining and other movies.
Now, Nick, when you say clues,
that's what I want to go over here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I know that some of our viewers are going to want to just kind of know what those are. So.
Okay. Well, number one, in the beginning of The Shining, Jack Nicholson has that job interview. Okay. The man sitting on the desk, the hotel manager is supposed to be John F. Kennedy. Sitting there's an eagle on his desk. There's an American flag on his desk. He's wearing red, white, and blue. As a matter of fact, Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and the little boy, they only wear red, white, and blue throughout the whole movie. They don't wear any other colors besides red, white, and blue. Now, room 237. 237 in the book The Shining, Stephen King's book, I think it was 217. It wasn't 237. Well, why change the number? What's the significance? Right. At the time, it was believed that the moon was 237,000 miles away from Earth. Okay. Now, the scene where Danny is sitting playing with his trucks on this octagonal patterned carpet, right? And this ball comes rolling toward him. Okay. And it's from a ghost, right? He doesn't know who is that. And he's like, Mom, is that you? And then he walks into room 237. Okay. That is supposed to symbolize, the ball rolling to him is supposed to symbolize the government asking him to do this. Okay. And then when Danny stands up and walks over to room 237, his sweater has a rocket on it that says Apollo 11. Okay. So that symbolizes that when Nicholson goes to the room and he investigates because his son was hurt. Somebody was in the, his mother said someone hurt him so he goes in there and then he sees that pretty woman get out of the bathtub, remember?
Uh-huh.
And I think he's kissing her, and then she turns into this dead woman, this corpse that's laughing at him. That's to symbolize that. Well, Kubrick, you thought this was going to be this great thing, and now you're just, he kind of felt like he was made a fool out of. He felt used, and he felt like he didn't want to do this. He didn't want to be, do this big lie. You know what I mean? He didn't want to put that out there. He didn't want to do this. The biggest clue, I think, one of the biggest clues is all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. Okay. If you look at that very closely, zoom in on the typewriter and the paper that has those words on it, the word all is not spelled with L's. Kubrick had the typist type A11.
Apollo 11.
Right. So it's up. She used ones instead of L's. So it says Apollo 11 work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Jack kind of, I guess, referencing maybe Kennedy himself, because I mean, John Kennedy was also known as Jack.
Could be. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, that it could be. Also, here's another thing. If you've ever seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick wanted that film to be released on the 30th anniversary of the moon landing. Which doesn't make sense. Why would he want to do that? It's not about science fiction. It's got nothing to do with the Apollo mission or anything.
Right.
But he wanted to release that movie, and it was ironclad in his contract that it had to be released on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And
the title of the movie, I'm guessing, being a play on the fact that America had been duped. While we all thought we were being shown one thing, we were actually being shown nothing. I mean, would I be kind of correct in that, or?
I'm sorry. Say that.
So the title of the movie, Eyes Wide Shut,
yes,
just being released on the anniversary of the moon landing. As Americans, I wasn't alive then, but as Americans, they were all told, hey, this is what's going on, and but
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, but also, at the end of that movie, Tom Cruise has a scene with Sidney Pollack, and Sidney is telling him, what if it was all hoax? What if it was all a hoax? What if it was just an act? What if it was just a charade? He says things like that throughout the movie. Gosh, there's so much in there on it, and The Shining too. Check out the documentary Room 237. It's about this whole thing I'm talking about. There's another documentary, I think you could find it on YouTube, called The Shining Code, and it's got tons of clues in it on the whole thing. And
Room 237 and The Shining Code.
Yeah, and then there's another one called which will show you how he actually faked the footage, and that was Kubrick's Odyssey. Yeah, that's like a three-part. Okay. That's like a two-part thing, Kubrick's Odyssey, and he goes into it. It's mind-blowing. I just wish I could explain it a little bit better. You know what I mean? But it's pretty crazy. I think this is something that is known in Hollywood, that this was done. What's the movie? I think it's Toy Story 2, when Buzz Lightyear, he's sad or something because he sees himself on television and he realizes he's not a real astronaut. He's a toy. Mm-hmm. So he jumps, and when he does this jump, he lands on this floor, and on the floor is the carpet, the same carpet from The Shining.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting little Easter egg.
Yeah, right. And also, there's a James Bond movie called Moonraker. I think it's Moonraker, and that I think James Bond is running through somewhere, and he runs through this movie set. He runs through a movie set, and they're filming the moon landing in this movie studio, and
So let me ask a question, because anytime that we talk about things, the bigger overall question really has to be why. Why fake something like this? And I understand. Was this a matter of, or would it have been a matter of ego for the United States because of the space race that we were in with other, with China and Russia? And I mean, is that the whole thing? Was it a matter of raising morality for the United States because, we've got, not at that particular time, but I mean, we're on the brink of war, and at some point, we're in the middle of a war. It's like, why? Like, why would the government want to fake something like that? And the even bigger question, and the only reason I even give like thought to this being a possibility or this being plausible is we have not been back to the moon.
Yeah.
We've not been back in over 40 years, I guess.
Yeah.
So why do it? And then why haven't we been back if it's true?
Why do it is not really so much. I could only guess at that. You know what I mean? Like ego. Yeah, we're going to, there's a space race. We're going to do it. We're going to be first. I can really more speak to why I think they faked it. And that is because they probably knew there was something up there. You know what I mean? And they couldn't let us see that, or they didn't want us to see how they got up there. You know what I mean? They didn't want, the Russians to see how we got up there. They didn't want us to see this technology, so they had to fake it and say, no, we did it with a rocket. But some of it just really doesn't make sense. Like in missions after 11, like that dune buggy, how the hell they get that dune buggy up there?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff. There's no dust. When the guys are jumping, there's no dust, you would think the dust would stay in the air since there's no, you know what I mean? You see some of these footage, these pieces of footage with these astronauts on there, and it does look like they're being pulled up from wires. I've seen it where, they're walking in slow motion and they're bouncing and everything. And then when people play it slowed down, or no, sped up, it looks like they're normally just bouncing. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff there. You know what I mean?
Well, I know that there, and I think I mentioned this to you also, there was a Mythbusters episode where, they quote unquote debunked the theory that the moon landing was faked and everything. And just like is with anything in Hollywood these days, you can debunk, you can prove or disprove anything with a little bit of movie magic. And it's funny because back then, like they used a lot of practical effects, which, and for those who don't know, practical effects just basically means it wasn't done with computers and whizzes and things like that. It was very difficult to tell if it was real or fake because they used real scientific ways to do things and like physical ways to trick the human eye into thinking it was seeing something different. So, I mean, it's always good stuff. And I would really like to revisit this, this again, because I know you've got a lot of other information that you can share and that you're just kind of bullet pointing for us tonight.
Yeah. Sure. I'd love to. And, if anybody has any questions, about it, we could tackle it another, in a future show, or if anybody has any questions about anything we've talked about that I've talked about on here, Kennedy, ghosts, OJ Simpson, whatever, fire away. Let me know.
Now, Nick, is there a particular email or any certain contact way that people could reach out to you?
I'll give you my email address, or, I'll, if you want to be friends on Facebook, anybody, I always accept people as long as they don't have like bikinis and, you know what I mean, very voluptuous women that have no mutual friends of mine, or you know what I'm talking about.
You want to tell you about the greatest home loan that's out there these days?
I've gotten about.
They start asking you about your extended car warranty.
Oh my God. I've gotten so many. Have you gotten your free grant or your $40,000 that you just get free that people are just handing out? I'm like, now I just tell people, yep, yeah, they brought it over this morning. I'm so happy. All good.
Oh man.
But yeah, okay, here's my email. It's Nick Drago 70. It's all lowercase, NickDrago 70 at Gmail.
Okay, awesome.
So yeah, if anybody, fire away, or like I said, we can be friends on Facebook.
Now, I want to ask you another question about your book before we cut out for the weekend or for the week, I guess. Do you have any kind of like anticipated launch date for it, or publishing date, or anything like that? Or
I've really been writing a lot lately, and now see, like I've kind of like led on that I've been kind of like it was kind of a merry-go-round. I would get clean, then I would be okay for a while, then I would get back on it, and then I would get. Well, I don't want the whole book to be all just 20 years of all that. You know what I mean? So what I decided to do is just take like 10 or 12 stories that were really kind of poignant, very, important to what I want to say. And then just kind of like, I think I want to call it something like Use Once and Destroy 10 Stories of Heroin Addiction at the Turn of the Century. Something like that, But anyway, I have about half of that written and a rough draft of the rest of it. I'm saying the next 6 months I should be done with it.
Okay. Yeah. Any kind of mailing list or update list or anything like that people can subscribe to yet?
No, not yet. No.
Just in time for Christmas.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Right. But I'll come on and read another chapter if you want something more about, like, this chapter was about like kind of sticking my toe in it. You know what I mean? And then what led to, but like I could read another chapter of when it's all full blown and what's going on. So but I don't want to read too much because, I want you to buy the book.
Absolutely.
Sure. Right. Also, well, I'll tell you what we'll do is when you get done, we'll have you on to read another chapter, and then maybe we can get a signed copy of it to one of our viewers. That might be kind of a cool thing to
raffle.
Do. Launch party.
Right
launch
on.
Party. Yeah. We'll do your launch party here on the Mac and Chuck Show.
Rock on.
I'm kidding, unless you want to. I mean, I'm but awesome. Well, Nick, man, thanks for being on the show. Just as always, man, it's a pleasure having you on, and I love you, my friend, and I just really appreciate you being on the show. And
absolutely,
I love talking to you guys. I look forward to it, man, and we're gonna have a lot of good ones. And Sherry, welcome aboard. Glad you're here with us.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. Have a wonderful week to you.
You all have a good week.
All right.
Thanks,
Nick.
Some heavy stuff, both on his book and on the Kubrick thing.
Yep. And I got a couple things I want to touch base with him on, so I'll be dialing up that email and sending him my novel.
There you go. So, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the moon landing? Are you a believer, a naysayer? Moon landing fake, wrestling's real?
Yeah, wrestling is real. To be honest, I've never really delved into that. I've heard that. It's hard to say. The one thing I always stuck by is exactly what you said, which is if we made it once, how come we haven't made it with the more superior technology that we have now instead of 55 years ago?
We hold more technology in our hand right here than they had in the entirety of Houston, and like, what is it, Cape Canaveral?
Yes,
Cape Canaveral. I mean, then why have we not gone back? And the technology is definitely there.
Nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I would agree with that.
Well, here's something else to think of. Why was the funding for NASA terminated?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that they wanted that to go more privatized. Honestly, it's probably a good thing that went private, because you get the government out of things tend to progress, more rapidly. I mean, we do have like reusable space rockets and things like that, now, whereas before it was a up, okay, well, we're done with that one, with the exception of the shuttle program.
Right.
But so I think getting the government out of that was probably not a bad thing. But yeah, I don't know. I can't for the life of me understand why we haven't gone back
Right.
up there.
I'm gonna take some NyQuil and go to bed.
All right.
My sinuses are killing me.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us tonight on the show.
Appreciate
Terry,
it.
thank you for coming in here. Appreciate you hanging out. And if you guys have any questions, you want to reach out to Nick, have any questions for him, please feel free to do so. He's really a great guy. He's really easy to talk to. And again, special thank you to Nick for sharing your story with us tonight and some of the book. And we look forward to carrying that on a little bit more. So anyway, with that being said, everyone have a wonderful week. If you have thoughts or anything like that you'd like to bring on the show, let us know. Next week is our third Sunday. So as you know, that means Pastor Jesse's going to be on the show. So questions for him, let us know. If you'd like to come on and just kind of have a little bit of back and forth with him about your beliefs, we welcome that also. Or if you just want to share some information about your particular sect of faith, we'd love to hear that as well and just kind of see where they match up, where they don't match up. And we just love to have you guys on. That being said, I think we may be out, Mac.
Yeah, I'm about out.
All right. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you next Sunday.
All right. Take care.